Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Kuzma and Zach Metkler.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast presented by the official NFL Photos store. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and today we are going to break down the upcoming Monday Night Football matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Steelers currently sitting at a 9-2 record atop the AFC and the AFC North. Third in that same division are the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a 5-6 record. And when I say we, I am talking about none other than Zach Metkler. Zach, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. Trying to look forward to Steelers Monday this time.
Yeah, I know. We're a little ahead of the curve here because of the awkward schedule that continues. I'm going to stop complaining about it. I think I've complained about it on every single show so far that I've recorded, at least. Yet another primetime game for the Steelers. They get an extra day here, but one less to prepare for the Ravens for Sunday night beyond that. And then, of course, the elephant in the room game we keep talking about, the New England Patriots. So in order to arrive at that, make that game a big game with New England, they got to take care of business first against two division foes, both of which we were saying off the air that we don't know how they got to the record they got to.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you look at the Bengals right now specifically, you know, what they've been able to do offensively and defensively, nothing really jumps off the page. I know I made a comment earlier on in the season about the Titans kind of being where they were. You know, they had a very good record. They're obviously first place in the AFC South right now, but they were lackluster on both sides of the ball. And I think the Bengals fall into that category of a team that is 5-6, you know, and because of how weak the AFC is this year, they're right in the thick of things, but nothing has really jumped out this year for the Bengals, make them feel like a worthwhile team. I think the highest I've had them ranked in my weekly power rankings is somewhere in the mid-teens, and that was earlier on in the season. Since then, you know, they've been teetering around the mid-20s, even though they're a 5-6 team right in the thick of everything. So, you know, on paper, as we always refer to it as, they're not really, the Ravens and the Bengals aren't that good of a team at this point in the stage of the season.
No, they're it's so difficult because I like to come on here and be the homer I'm accused of. Usually it's always the glass half full and sunny days and rainbows and, you know, bright blue skies for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And every time I want to get excited about them beating a hapless opponent, it ends up being somewhat close games and things of that nature. And I want to say maybe it was it you or was it Tommy Jaggy that actually tweeted out that, you know, it was still an impressive win for the Steelers over the Packers, considering they were -3 in the turnover department. That doesn't happen if you have a bad football team. You should lose games where you're -3. I mean, that should show something to our fans at least and give you some hope with the Steelers. I think one of the things that pops up too and sticks fresh in your brain is Chris Boswell kicking the game-winning field goal, which he's done a lot of kicking field goals against the Cincinnati Bengals. They've had some close games, but overall the Steelers have just absolutely owned them. It doesn't matter if they're at home. It doesn't matter if they're on the road. This will be the second time they're meeting this year. And as you said, I mean, Cincinnati last week had a division game as well. They had to play the Cleveland Browns. They finally got some things rolling, and it's they had a home game. They're in this is the middle of a 3 home game stand for them here in the season. The Browns last week, they're on a 2-game winning streak. They went and they won in Denver, barely, skin of their teeth, 20-17. If Denver actually had a quarterback, maybe that might be a different story. But the Browns had somewhat of at least a decent run defense, and they finally got Joe Mixon going last week because Jeremy Hill's now out of the picture. He went on IR. He elected to have some type of surgery. Let's pretty much face it, Mixon was brought in anyways because Hill wasn't just getting the job done. He had a good rookie year and then kind of disappeared from there. But still, the Bengals, even they beat the Browns 30-16, but it was a mixed bag from them. Randy Bullock, who had a cup of coffee here in Pittsburgh, kicked 3 field goals in that game, and there was some garbage time stuff going on too, where the Browns, were executing on offense. Believe it or not, that's tough. That's a difficult thing to say. But anyways, I was pulling it up here. Joe Mixon, 23 carries, 114 yards and a touchdown. He also had 3 receptions for 51 yards. He seemed to be the focal point of that Bengals offense last Sunday. And I don't know. The Bengals offensive line, for everything we've said, they only gave up 1 sack on Sunday with Andy Dalton. And I know Andy Dalton's been throwing the ball away and things of that nature to try not to just get hit like a piñata, but they were able to take a Tomlinism here, impose their will on the Cleveland Browns. And after seeing what the Green Bay Packers did with Jamal Williams and a banged-up offensive line on Sunday Night Football, and then, like Brett Hundley, they were able to run the football as well. And I wonder, maybe, I always kick these over to you, the lineman questions. Is it a cause for concern maybe heading into Monday night?
Brian and I talked about it earlier on in the season, one of the podcasts, about how it seems like the Steelers' defense, especially the front 7, tends to take, for whatever reason, they tend to be a slow starter. I know when we saw it in the Lions game, the Titans game, the second half, they were a completely different football team than they were in the first half. So I think a key for the Steelers moving forward to this game, especially seeing the success that the Bengals were able to have finally on the ground this past week, is don't start slowly. I mean, up front, they're nothing special along the offensive line, but they also don't have a terrible offensive line. They're average, I would say, at best. No one really jumps off the page as a guy that really is going to set the world on fire. But the Steelers' front 7, as long as they can get some pressure and prevent anything from getting going, they should be in a good place. I mean, when you look back earlier on with this previous matchup with them, Joe Mixon was 7 for 48, 6.9 yards per run. That whole debacle about him not getting enough carries because of the fact that they were playing from behind. And obviously the Packers spent most of the game in front, and they had those couple big plays by Jamal Williams. But at the end of the day, I think the Steelers defense still did well enough to really not make it a concern in my mind. I think the Packers offensive line is a better offensive line than they would appear to be playing. I know I've made a comment to you before in the past, Joe, about how they have guys on there that just seem to not really be clicking together, even though they individually are all talented on the Packers offensive front. So I think realistically, it's more so a result of the fact that the Packers are a better team than their record would indicate. Missing Aaron Rodgers, missing some of the other guys they've been having throughout the course of the year, you didn't expect them to have that type of offensive performance that we saw, especially with Brett Hundley at the helm. So looking forward to the Bengals and a guy like Joe Mixon, who proved last week against the Browns' relatively staunch run defense that he could be a threat. And we've seen him as a dual threat player as well so far this season in certain flashes of areas. I think it does raise an area for concern. Every week I seem like I tweet out about the fact that the Steelers' kryptonite seems to be running back screens. We saw last season how many times we would get burned. I remember that one play that probably sticks out in most fans' mind is that Ezekiel Elliott run against the Cowboys.
Which one?
Last week again.
Which one?
Exactly. It seems like no matter what happens, teams are able to get their athletic running backs out in space and make a play from it. I mean, Jamal Williams is not a burner at all. He's relatively balanced between a tackles type running back who has some receiving ability. So to see him go and make that type of play down the field was pretty impressive in my eyes. And Joe Mixon is a much more dynamic running back. He was touted highly for his ability to be a pass-catching running back. So that's something I think the Steelers need to be careful about, because for whatever reason, even with how well they've been playing against the pass in recent games, they still need to find a way to shut Joe Mixon down. I think if they shut Joe Mixon down, Andy Dalton has done nothing this season to prove that, hey, I can be this guy that can carry the team. For those couple of years we saw him doing well, it feels like that was forever ago, even though it was only like 1 or 2 seasons ago that he was playing at a Pro Bowl level. So offensive front as a whole, the offensive line can get the job done for the Bengals, but I do like the Steelers heavily in this one up front.
Yeah, I mean, how can you not? And the way it's been working is, let me see, the last time I think the Bengals had, let's see, the Steelers have won. I'm trying to look this up. Of course, it's only showing me the regular season. Computers, gotta love them. The Steelers have won the last 5 games going back to December 13th of 2015, but the Bengals have actually, they won their last one. I think it was like a month before that, and it's been pretty much dominance the rest of the way. The Bengals had lost like the previous 3 before that. So that puts them as 1-8 in the last 9 games against the Steelers, which is not good whatsoever. They won 2 previous to those 9 and then had lost at least 5 in a row here. I think there was only that one playoff game that was really disgusting, dirty, ugly kind of game, from everything from the weather to the actual play to Ben getting hurt, Antonio Brown getting knocked out. And those are kind of things, of course, we're still fresh in our mind that we're worried about on coming up on primetime on Monday night. Another thing that's interesting, too, is that, and I didn't get a chance to pull stats on this, but I know it'll be shown on ESPN for sure on Monday night. They're going to show if Andy Dalton doesn't have a solid game and he's floundering, he is not a primetime guy. He's very much the opposite of Ben Roethlisberger, who excels in these spotlight type of games. And so just to kind of support what you were saying, I don't think Dalton has a whole lot of guys that are a supporting cast around him. Now, Mixon's supposed to be a do-it-all kind of back. He has hands, which is a little different than, Jeremy Hill, and they were using Giovanni Bernard as kind of that third down type guy, or the guy they would bring in as a change of pace, more of the passing back type guy. The Bengals are without their first-round draft pick, John Ross. He's still a ghost as far as the 2017 season. It looked like he was going to be back and then hurt again. I don't know what his progress is right now. The tight end, I can't think of his name, Tyler Eifert, is out too. They have Tyler Kroft, who's an okay replacement, but he's not as big a threat. I mean, Eifert was kind of, last season, he was like Gronk. And the guy, he's just often hurt and not available. And the best ability is availability, as Coach Tomlin says. So you've got A.J. Green, who's been a kind of a Steelers killer, but he's been quiet the last few times. And the Bengals secondary, which is, always praised for having all of these, the first-round pick pedigree and everything of that nature, they're kind of a mixed bag too. And they have not had the same type of success that they had in the past against Antonio Brown. So when you see some of the things that are going on as far as the narratives for this game, what you're going to see is that the Steelers are 12th in the league in points scored, and the Bengals are 25th. The Steelers are 4th in points allowed. The Bengals are 10th. Okay, still respectable as a defense, but Cincinnati doesn't create the splash plays. They're -7 on the year. Giveaway, takeaway, that's 27th in the league, and the Steelers are an even 0, which is 16th, right in the middle of the pack of 32 teams. The Steelers' offense 5th in passing, 19th in with the run, but Cincinnati, even for that big game for Mixon, they're 31st in the run and 28th in the pass, almost as bad as the Baltimore Ravens, who will be next week's opponent. So we were talking about that. So it comes down to defense, and the pass defense for the Steelers, as far as yards are concerned, the eyeball test, certainly, the big plays in that, not always there, but still 3rd in yards given up on D to opposing quarterbacks. You have the Bengals 5th overall as well, but the Steelers are 6th against the run, and the Bengals are 28th against the run. So immediately, what does that tell you? It tells you this could be a Le'Veon Bell type of day, and I'm not just talking about running the ball anymore. I actually just wrote something about whether Bell is back to wide receiver 2 status with the Steelers, and I guess we're going to have to see how it goes forward with practice. You got an extra day. Maybe Juju or Vance McDonald might get out there. They missed the last game. I think McDonald's missed 2 in a row. So those are some extra threats. Now, Martavis Bryant's always been a killer with the Bengals, but I think this is going to come down to Bell, who caught he caught a dozen balls. He broke Franco Harris's almost 35-year franchise mark for the most catches in a single game by a running back. And over the last 3 games since the bye week, I forget what he had. Like he has something like it was 31 catches or 26 catches on 31 targets. He's the second most targeted guy outside of Antonio Brown. He has the second most catches to Antonio Brown. He's like 4th in yards though, because Juju has the bigger splash plays. So Bell has already kind of like he's become a focus on the offense. And another guy that's become a focus on this offense, as we saw with Juju out, Martavis Bryant, heavily involved last week, running the ball, blocking, targeted multiple times. Every single one of those first 3 scoring drives, he was targeted. There was a pass interference. There's the one that he did catch, and they tried to do an end around on the very first drive, and he come up short. He looks hungry, and that could be dangerous for that Bengals secondary if he comes around, let alone adding a component like Juju back into the mix.
Yeah, I think when you see Martavis Bryant, when he's been able to kind of progress his way back into it after that whole snafu earlier on in the season with the benching and not getting enough playing time, whatever, you know, if you want to look at it as, himself more integrated back into the entire system. You know, he's made some very important critical plays in recent weeks. You know, that touchdown that he had last week could have came in a better time against the Packers. He might not be having his big splash plays like he's been having since the beginning of his time with the Steelers, but I think realistically his ability to come back and start to build that rapport back up with Ben Roethlisberger is extremely crucial for this offense. You know, you need to have – we saw last season what happens when Antonio Brown didn't have a guy opposite him that can make the play. Obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster has kind of developed that role to this point. But having Juju Smith-Schuster come back in full strength and having Martavis Bryant regain that confidence that he has in himself and that chemistry he has with Ben Roethlisberger, that's huge. You know, that takes a lot of pressure off the offense, takes a lot of pressure off of Bell, who, if I'm not mistaken, he carried the ball 35 times against the Bengals the last time the Steelers played them. So, you know, you want to be able to have that ability to have another receiver in there. You know, I think Bell has gotten so many receptions this season. Well, one, you know, he's a phenomenal receiving back as well, but you see Ben a lot of times he'll check down, you know, and the play starts breaking down around him. Bell 9 times out of 10 is by himself in the flats. Ben would rather take that positive yardage and lift the play another play than take the sack, which, you know, I think is huge. And having a reliable receiver like Le'Veon Bell in the backfield, that makes it a lot easier for Ben to be able to have that confidence to just dump it off and trust in Bell's ability to make a play out in the open. But, you know, Martavis Bryant still has the ability to blow the top off of a defense. You know, just because he hasn't done it this season doesn't mean he's lost his speed. He still shows that deep speed he has. I know that the opening kickoff return he had against the Packers, I was so caught off guard by the fact that he was back there returning it. But you saw the speed that he still has. You know, he's not a slow player. So at any moment, he still has the ability to potentially blow the top off the defense if Ben can connect with him deep. As you pointed out, Juju Smith-Schuster, splash plays that I think a lot of people were surprised about because he wasn't exactly, you know, praised for his deep speed. So that was a nice welcome. And obviously Antonio Brown's Antonio Brown. So the 3 of those players plus Bell working out of the backfield and with the offense kind of starting to find its groove as the season's gone along, I wouldn't be surprised to see fireworks this season, you know, or this game specifically. You know, I think the Bengals defense has been nothing special. You know, of course, now I say this, they're going to come out and have an all-pro day. But I just think you see the weapons that the Steelers have and how they're kind of starting to come back together. You know, Ben seems to have shaken off all the rust he had at the beginning of the season. You know, I know you and I aren't big fans of Pro Football Focus rankings and whatnot, but, you know, I think right now he's ranked as the number 3 or 4 quarterback in the NFL through the first 12 weeks. You know, he's been on an absolute tear since the Jaguars game. So having him come back to what we've known to be as a future Hall of Fame quarterback, having that chemistry with Martavis Bryant come back, have that chemistry build with Juju Smith-Schuster and Antonio Brown, arguably making a case to be the league MVP for be the first wide receiver to ever win the league MVP, which I think he deserves based on the inconsistencies of other players in the league. I think the Steelers' offense is getting to a point now where they could potentially be a 30-point-a-game team. I mean, they put up over 30 over the last 2 weeks now if they're not doing it the entire beginning of the season against teams that aren't anything to write home about, but they're still, you know, quality teams playing quality games. So I think having Bryant and Bell in some capacity involved with this game is going to be the key for them to be able to beat this defense.
Yeah, and the thing with Bell is it's not all dump-offs. It looks like a lot of it is by design, and he's comfortable in his skin again after, missing the whole preseason training camp and everything else. He's a focal point of the offense, and we saw Bryant worked in by no mistake because of Juju's absence, of course. So, and then, of course, I was talking about Chris Boswell and how he kicked. It was practically all kicks down in Cincinnati last season when they went down to Paul Brown Stadium. I think he kicked 5 or 6, and then it was an Eli Rogers touchdown late that really separated the pack there. It was almost identical to maybe about a month or so later when they traveled out to Arrowhead, and then Boswell did the same thing in the playoffs. But before I proceed with all of that and my next thought on Pro Football Focus, I want to talk about the NFL Photos Store, where Steelers fans, you could score photos of top plays and your favorite players. We made it easy for you to find the incentive here for a 25% off promo code, which is Steel City. It's good through all of the holiday season here. So if you go to steelcityunderground.com/photos, you could find the link there for the Pittsburgh Steelers official online photo store. So new photos are added every week, and if you find something you really like, you could get 25% off of one item for that order by using the promo code Steel City. Once again, at steelcityunderground.com/photos. So, talking about Boz, and then talking about, let me go to Pro Football Focus real quick, because I made this remark to you while we were off the air here. They have Joe Mixon at an 80.1 rating on Pro Football Focus. And it seems kind of high, and by their grading, if you're in the 90s, you're like, honor student valedictorian, basically. And the Steelers really only have, I think they have David DeCastro. Well, I have it here. I'll pull it up. Antonio Brown as elite players. And they have, let's see, if you're in the 80s, I think you're above average, and then there's something in between, probably like 85 to 90, where it's high quality. Well, Mixon is an 80.1. Do you want to maybe venture a guess as to what Le'Veon Bell's rating is by Pro Football Focus?
Probably somewhere in the same ballpark, if I had to assume.
It's a few points lower at 78.4.
Yep.
Believe that or not, they have him lower. So it's like, are you doing this by volume? Because, Mixon was not getting a whole lot of carries. And it's funny, too, because if you don't think that Bell has some motivation, maybe Mixon does, too. He was calling Mixon out on Twitter a few weeks ago for copying his style. And because Mixon made some off-cuff comment, locker room comment before or after a game that he could do everything that Le'Veon Bell does if he gets the ball. Because he wasn't getting the ball. So, of course, Le'Veon Bell, that got his attention, and he says some stuff, smack talk back on Twitter, and there you go, and there you have it. So, the Pro Football Focus thing could be, it's really a mixed bag, because they hate on some guys. They hated on Ben for the longest time this season. He's jumped up to an 86.6, and they still have, it's quite shocking, because Pouncey's gone down. Pouncey's actually rated lower than both Big Al Villanueva and Chris Hubbard. Chris Hubbard's at a 69.9, by the way. A little inside joke with me, Zach, and Eric Herman. Doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. We're kids at heart. Well, by the way, you're not getting any younger, though. I forgot to wish you a happy birthday on the air. It is Zach Metkler's birthday, so everyone leave some comments and some birthday wishes for Zach here as he gets he gets closer to 1 foot in the grave. Not as close as Brian Roach, though. So.
You still got a while until I get to that point. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, a long while. So, now where do I go from this as far as the Bengals? I think the Steelers are a better coach team. I'm really hoping that everyone leaves this game and in good health. They have to come away with the victory. Oh, you know what? That's what I was going to say. This will surprise you too about Pro Football Focus, for all the hate that everyone is giving guys like Artie Burns and Cody Sensabaugh. This is going to blow your mind. Pac-Man Jones for the Bengals, 43.7 rating. And for whatever the default thing is, 2 tight ends on here. God forbid. I don't know why they have the Steelers like this. So they don't have the slot corner in here, so I can't tell you what the other one is. But Drake Kirkpatrick, 62.8. That's lower than Burns at a 71.3 and Sensabaugh at a 79.6. Maybe they might read it the way we do with like some of the cover 2 and the zone schemes and things of that nature. They still hate on Bud Dupree. They don't like Sean Davis this year. But you know what? The Steelers, that front seven, they're going to get going. I think the one that we need to look out for is the Bengals front seven has a guy. I just closed the thing. Oh man, I'm going to have to open it back up. It's a Carl Lawson, that's rookie for. Is he a rookie for the Bengals or second-year player? I keep forgetting when we were talking about him. Rookie.
He's a rookie, rookie out of Auburn.
Yeah, 8-9 sacks, and I had it up here, and let me see. Yes, rookie. Okay, I got him back. 6'2", 261, so nobody thinks I'm just pulling these numbers out of my posterior. And I don't have how many sacks he has. 7 sacks on the year. He had 1.5 against the Browns. He had 1 against Tennessee, the Colts. A lot of those are close games. He had 2.5 against the Packers. And when the Bengals, that was still with Aaron Rodgers still playing before he got hurt. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about the Bengals. These games always tend to be tight. They always tend to be hard fought, as AFC North battles do. I think my takeaways for this game, as always, limit your mistakes as far as turnovers and drive-killing penalties. We've seen that hurt the Steelers more often than not. Maybe not. There were some phantom penalties. There were some things that went each way on Sunday Night Football. That wasn't maybe the biggest thing that hurt them. The 2 Roethlisberger interceptions and the Bell fumble hurt them against the Packers. They can't afford to do that and get nothing in return, being take the ball away from the Bengals. I think they could force Andy Dalton into some bad throws. I think A.J. Green is probably the biggest threat, so I just don't see how the Steelers front seven doesn't contain Joe Mixon in this game. So I'm going to say if you contain Joe Mixon on the defensive side of the ball, and if you don't commit any mental mistakes or turnovers, this should be something that's very much in the Steelers' favor.
Yeah, if you look at their last matchup against the Bengals, they were able to get Andy Dalton to the ground 4 times. He lost 32 yards on those 4 sacks. He threw 2 interceptions. So, the Steelers have shown the ability this year to obviously get after the quarterback. They're doing it at a relatively historic rate from what we've seen in recent years. They're forcing turnovers when they're in crucial moments in the game. So I think if they can do that and minimize their own turnovers, which they did last time. Last time we played the Bengals, if I'm not mistaken, we didn't turn the ball over once. So the Steelers can go and do that, force turnovers, and get the Bengals to start playing on their heels, which, as we've seen in the past, the Bengals do not do a good job when they're forcing the pressure to be playing from behind. So I think realistically the Steelers can do that and follow the same formula that they've done with some of these other teams like the Bengals in the past. It should be a relatively I'm not going to say an easy game, because I don't believe there's a such thing as an easy game in the NFL. But it should be a stereotypical Steelers-Bengals game where you're going to see a desperate Bengals team trying to claw their way back into the playoffs, but come up short if they end up getting behind. So I think that's the biggest concern I have with the Bengals, is just the fact that, they're going to be playing hot. They're going to be playing at home. They're desperate, trying to make the playoffs. So, they can't, at this point, cannot afford to go to 5-7. They need to at least break 600 or 5-6, to really have a chance of getting back into it. So, I think that has a chance to really kind of cause some errors on their part, because they're a hot-headed team that typically lets their egos get the best of them at times. So I think if the Steelers can keep their cool and, stay out of trouble, they should be able to walk out of this one with a win.
Yeah, and I said one thing I also pointed out, and I wrote it on the website, was the Steelers being focused on the New England Patriots is not a bad thing. Doesn't mean they're going to overlook the Bengals or the Ravens. In fact, this should be a motivator. This should be fuel going forward, that they cannot have any type of mistakes or slip-ups on the path to that game that's about 3 weeks away now. So that means they have to take care of business in Cincinnati. That means they have to beat the Ravens at home, and then they should be geeked up and ready for that. And I think they can make the statement, because Cincinnati giving up 16 to the Browns, 17 to the Broncos, 24 to the Titans, 23 to Jacksonville. Well, we can't speak for Jacksonville really, but 23 to the Colts. Those are all. I think it just screams that the Bengals defense is suspect, and maybe a better, well-oiled Steelers machine now that has had 2 home games to get Ben Roethlisberger back into prime Ben condition. What else can I say? that machine should be well oiled and firing on all cylinders on Monday night. So looks like the 6th straight, unless I got my numbers wrong. If I do, somebody will tell me anyway. So they're looking for 6 straight wins against the Bengals. Zach, thanks for joining me. And once again, happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. And would you allow me to say that you're the bike to my juju? Brian wouldn't let me.
That's fine. I appreciate it. I'm all for the analogy.
we're always trying to come up with nicknames for like one another, like Wayne and Garth, Batman and Robin. But the Wolfpack here, I think, is growing by one. I'm not sure if Brian's part of the Wolfpack or not, so we'll have to see. So one of these days, one of these days we're gonna have to all hop on. So folks, you get an extra day to listen to this. We will have a special episode also coming up to fill some of your Steelers hunger for Steelers content or something of that nature. I don't know. That didn't come out right, but I think that's where I leave everyone. My name's Joe. His name's Zach, with an H, by the way. Zach with an H. So, and it's not Zach. Until next time, be safe, be good, and we will catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.